Oh, the whole infrastructure committee. Just a few wee items here, Phil. Phil and Richard, you might like to come and join us, and Tim. Right.
I think if the staff speak to the Part A, accessible city one will be good.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, as previous reports before you on the first phase transport project stemming from Inaccessible City, this particular one seeks approval from Council to consult on 3 of those transport projects. The 3 projects themselves are the one around Hospital Corner. So that's what we call TP1B, which is really the final works in and around that area. We've already done council's already improved the enabling works, i.e. getting the traffic going in the right direction, and those have been almost all implemented. The other 2 are ones that we've briefed councillors on, and they've been before the ITE committee as well, and that's TP3, which is to do with the Cambridge Durham works, and that's really a renewal of that particular part of the street, and TP4, which is the Manchester Street, which is really trying to get to a space where that prioritises public transport, and we ended up with I guess a high degree of amenity for both pedestrians and for PT users in and around that area. So at the moment, we're not seeking approval to go out and do the works. We're only seeking approval to go out and consult on them. And we know that there's going to be a number of issues which members of the community will have an interest in. And the process, if we do get approval to go out and consult, will really be to take on board what that consultation is and feedback is, look at potential changes, as we've done with previous schemes we've brought before you, brief the councillors on those, what we think those should be, get some kind of, I guess, tacit approval of those, and then report back through ITE committee back to council for approval to actually go and construct them. So we don't envisage, all going well, if we get approval today, we don't envisage construction starting until, basically, I guess, Q3 this year.
None? Yanni.
Just obviously in light of our review of our capital program where everything's on the table, what's the BCR for each of these projects?
Don't know off the top of my head, to be honest. The funding for them is already provided through the cost share agreement, as we referred to in page 263. It's 72 million, of which Sarah Council and NZTA are part funders thereof. The indicative cost for them is around the 15 million for each one of the projects, so they're reasonably chunky projects. I don't actually have the BCs for them, Tim.
They were all dealt with in what's called a sort of streamlined business case for that first phase of accessible city projects, which was approved by the board of the New Zealand Transport Agency some time ago. And the benefits of these projects are all being taken account of in the wider programme business case for the delivery of the entire accessible city programme. So as we've briefed council in the past, the primary drivers for these early projects are to support the anchor projects, the early anchor projects being delivered, achieve the mode shift towards those other modes that Accessible City sets out to achieve, and really, I suppose, to make those changes, early changes to the road network that are prioritised in delivering Accessible City.
So I understand all of the reasons why these projects have got support. What we didn't know when this
is it a question, Yanni?
Well, yeah, it is a question.
Okay, we'll come to the question.
So in terms of our capital program review, are any of these projects going to be reconsidered in light of the entire accessible transport plan, which is,
not these ones, through you, Madam Chair, not these ones. These are all funded. And I was just thinking, we do have a program business case, and for all the inaccessible city transport projects, I think the BC was about 3 to 1, 4 to 1. So if you think of it around that sort of area, you get a pretty good rate of return on your $1 investment. You should get $3 or $4 back.
So just the question to me on the financials, I know that there's this figure of 72 million between Council, Sarah, NZTA. That figure excludes the bus interchange in town?
Correct.
So I just want to check, out of that 72, because if you take Manchester Street, that project's gone from 22 million to 15 million. So there's money that's being saved. So I just want to get, is it possible to get an understanding of how much of that 72 have we already committed? Because I understand that, does that include the super stops and the Riccarton Road? And can we just get some idea of...
Okay, can we just get an answer to that question? Of the 72 million, what has been spent?
By council.
The only funding that's already been spent on these 3 projects were the interim works at Hospital Corner. So those, I think, were in about the region of about 1.5 million of the sum that you have before you today. The other works as designs have been developed for the concept designs for all 3 projects. Some of the individual cost allocations to those have varied a little from the report we brought to Council on May the 22nd of last year, but the overall funding for the 3 projects as they stand at the moment is almost identical to the sum that we brought to Council last May. So I think that is about 43.5 million.
Okay. Any other questions?
Well, this doesn't, so if the government says we're only going to spend 22 million on, 15 on Manchester Street and not the 22 that we had on budget, we've prioritised and removed some projects from phase 1 because there wasn't enough money. So if the costs have gone down...
So what happens to any unspent capital in stage 1 of the accessible transport plan?
I've just heard that we've spent 6.6 million up to early March of that funding. So that's how much we've...
Are you still anticipating that 72 million will be the cost of this entire project?
Yeah.
Yes, the only question mark I think remains over the Fitzgerald twin bridges, and basically there was money allocated for betterment in relation to that, but as we know that the costs of their overall replacement is significantly more. So I guess there may be some funds which are unallocated at the end, and that would be the main thing it relates to.
Okay, thank you. So you have recommendations before you. Is there any further questions?
Yeah, yep. Thank you. Just on the funding split there, Richard, that includes the with the 3 parties there, is that includes the whole split? So, yep, is that a 52-48?
So the 72 million is 27 from us, 27 from Sarah and 18 from NZTA. Right. So that's the split.
Thank you.
Okay.
Right. Any debate? Yanni?
In light of our financial situation, I don't support these projects going ahead until we've managed to do our capital review. It's interesting to note that the government appears to have done some capital review because they've reduced the cost of the Manchester Street project from 22 to 15 million, which I still think is a huge amount of money to be spent on a street in the central city. If you think about the scale of money that's being spent on these individual streets, these are the costs of swimming pools or rec centres in our local communities. So I don't think it's good to go out for consultation until we really have been able to go through our capital works program. I'm not convinced that the benefit cost ratio stacks up for these projects, and I think in light of the information that we are still to receive around our infrastructure repairs, we don't know what the shortfall will be. But when we've got broken streets in some suburbs that are not going to be fixed in the next 20 to 30 years, and these projects getting gold plated, I can't support it. I want to see all that information together so that we can work out where the priorities are and actually spend the money accordingly. I'm also really concerned at the number of trees that are going to be removed as part of this project. I think it's really sad that we're losing so many mature trees in our central city. What we know from consultations previously, people wanted the central city to be a green space. They wanted more greenery, not less. And sadly, of course, we're losing heritage buildings as a result of these projects. And we know on Manchester Street, we were told that that project couldn't change, but when you look at the changes that have occurred, you start to question why the Majestic Theatre was pulled down. It doesn't even look like it was necessary. So I won't support these going ahead today. I think we need to work through our capital program review first.
Okay, Phil.
So the projects aren't going ahead today. Clearly, as the staff have said, this is where the council are prepared to put this out to consultation to seek the views of the community. And I too am a tree lover. I have been down and looked at those trees along Colombo Street, and clearly, unfortunately, many of them are uprooted. They're lifted up right now, and one has already fallen over. They have been deemed to be a health and safety matter. I think the matter about broken streets, and Yanni's right, and unfortunately we've got broken streets in a city, and we've also got people trying to get across and around the city safely. So that's, to me, really what it's about, and there is a new design, and on top of that, of course, there's a CERA requirement that, and we have an agreement with them, and in fact we would do it. So I'm supporting the recommendations. They're simply really asking the people for their views about this important part of our central city.
Okay, can I put them now? Glenn.
Yeah, I have a lot of sympathy for Councillor Johansson's point of view on this. I too am concerned about the costings, but I do want to hear from the community. I do want to hear them talk about priority. So if we look at the Pages Road Bridge and the Fitzgerald Bridges, these are our lifelines, and I really want to hear the community say, we've got some big priorities in this city. Yes, we do have the accessible city projects, but we have some major lifelines in the city which actually needed attended to. So I do really encourage the community to get behind and make their voice known.
Cool. So it's moved by Phil, seconded by Pauline. I'm going to put it. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. Carried. And do you want your vote recorded against, Yanni? Yanni would like his vote recorded against. Fine. Public Realm Network Plan Streets. This has now got all sorts of lovely things in it. It's got quirky designs and edible trees and all sorts of things added to it. Hugh, do you want to say anything?
Look, I think this plan is a good example of working collaboratively with CERA to put together, to take some basic information that the council had developed in a draft streetscape plan and standards and things, and working with CERA to put together some agreed standards to guide both the streetscape works in the central city and the anchor projects. So I think the important thing to remember is it doesn't commit you to any spending. There's no, you're going to see all these projects, such as the central city transport projects you were just looking at. They're going to come back to you both for approval for the projects before they go ahead and for approval once they're designed. But it just provides some guidelines for designers, for the different teams of designers working on different projects. We've been to a couple of workshops with you, and you've asked for some changes, which we made. We went to the Environment Committee, and we made some more changes there, which are embodied in the recommendations, and we have kind of mocked up how these would appear in the final document, if you'd like to see that. But really, I think it's just be good to have a discussion.
I'm just going to make some comments and make some questions. Just around the parking aspects, I'm really pleased to see the parking plan in this document. The concerns I have is the reduction of 10,000 on-street parks by 3,900. Is that the next one, is it? Okay, so you're doing one of the whole thing at a time. Okay. Okay. So is that the same with the delegating the decision making out as well?
Going.
But they all fall under the same delegating of the decision making out. Yep, fine. Yep, I'll park it.
I'm reiterating my question that I asked you at the committee meeting, that when we see the word greening,
Yep.
It doesn't necessarily denote grass. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah. And so that was, wanting to broaden that out to see if we can actually be open to including that in some areas of the public places, because I think that's the interpretation of what I've taken from the share an idea, that people did want green on the ground, not just in the trees and the shrubs. So that's possible to take into account where it's...
My understanding of the green section is the design principles is it would be possible to put grass in as an example of greening. I mean, it covers greening both in terms of ground cover and trees and in sustainable design elements in the streets.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Hugh. It's not off the table.
Thank you. Just several things. Do you, in terms of the individual drawings for each particular street, is there going to be any chance to consult on those with local communities? Like Victoria Street is the one that comes to mind where there's been a deputation.
Yep.
So this is making an assumption that Victoria Street will be 30k, have on-road cycleways, bus lanes, but...
So, yes, the answer is yes. In terms of those, it is just a design guide. It's only a guide. It doesn't require anyone to do anything. So Victoria Street, for instance, is part of the phase 2 of the Inaccessible City projects, and I think we've got it in our draft LTP at around the 16-17 area. So we'd assume that we go through a similar process to what we've done in relation to the first phase projects, whereby we mock up some concept designs, run them past the councillors, get approval to consult, bring them back to you, etc., etc. So don't take what's in there as being something that's already designed, developed, and a done deal, because it's not supposed to be. I guess it's our view as to what it might look like, given the road hierarchy, which is in an accessible city. But yet there would still need to be an approval process, and there'd be opportunity for consultation as part of it.
And just a question on the naming policy. That was something that we'd previously asked for. Is there a naming policy in here? I couldn't find it. But.
Now, I did have an email on this. Park naming is a full council and roads a community board, except for Central City when it is full council. So there's not a naming policy in the document itself, but there's a separate process.
But for the lanes, we have lots of council policies that relate to the Central City around our streets, like we have infrastructure design standards.
To ask for another report.
Well, we did ask for that.
Okay, well, it's not covered in here.
Okay.
If you want it to be, you'll have to ask for a separate report,
Right.
but it's not part of this.
Okay, and then just the final question from me is, when I look at the Central City, this only seems to stop at Madras Street.
3 o'clock.
So is there, like, I know council previously, we had the whole 4 Avs and we had a number of laneways through the inner city east, for example, but it doesn't seem to get captured through here, what you're doing in the inner city east area in terms of the public realm.
But certainly the public realm plan does cover all of the Central City. Some of the areas or some of the chapters are only likely to address parts of it, as is their focus. But some of the other ones, when you look at public transport, obviously that shows the public transport routes going out to Fitzgerald Ave. So it does cover the whole area, but we're not envisaging that every part of it will have public realm money spent on it.
It covers the whole area.
But so if you
Thank you.
Well, just on page 77 of it, we have a policy that we would have lanes through Hereford, Worcester, Gloucester, Armagh. We had a lanes policy and we put money aside and we've acquired property, but I can't see anything in this document that links that in. So in our Central City plan, one of the key things that we'd identified for public realm was to have laneways through those really large blocks in the inner city east.
Mm.
These the lanes that are shown in these plans are indicative of they're what are currently in existence or they're currently planned. So they don't count out more lanes in the future. It's not an end plan. It's not a final design, but it's showing what's approved now or in existence.
Right, so it doesn't preclude any further lanes going in
No,
at any
that's
stage.
correct.
Right, unless there's any further debate or questions? Sorry, Paul?
Probably should have targeted my question. I am a little concerned about the public realm taking away car parking spaces to the radical degree that it is. And I'll continue that conversation in the
Okay.
parking plan.
That's cool. Okay, I haven't got any amendments. I've got a mover and a seconder for what's come from the Environment Committee. Can I put that now? Those in favour, please say aye. Those opposed, carried. And we move on to the draft Christchurch Central Parking Plan. Paul. Hi. So Richard's just staying there for the entire duration because he's in charge of everything. Do you want to outline anything on this, guys?
Ruth, do you want to?
Yeah. So, is that on? Yeah. So the parking plan is part of the Christchurch Central Recovery Plan and Accessible City. So we know that parking is critical to support the recovery of the central city, but we also want it to support becoming a vibrant and prosperous central city, providing safe and easy access to the city to try and reduce congestion. And it's also about trying to support modal shift along with making it really easy to access the central city. So the overall aim, I guess, of the parking plan is really about providing information to help guide our understanding around the appropriate level of parking that is needed to support the recovery. We've also identified potential locations at a kind of high level of where we think parking facilities are most needed based on where the highest demands are. The parking plan includes 6 key components. The parking principles, which help to guide the design of future parking buildings. Short-term parking forecast tool, so we can monitor what is happening on the streets right now and out to 2018. An operations, draft operations plan, which we want to bring back to council later so that we can better manage our assets. Cycle parking, and then an action plan at the end, which mainly focuses on how we operate, sort of operational priorities. So the main recommendation is really for council to focus on short stay parking through the rebuild of our own assets by working with private suppliers to deliver parking. As you know, we've started the EOI process around that. Following the last time we were at council, we've done some more public consultation with the ITE committee and sort of incorporated the feedback from that into the revised plan, particularly focusing on revising some of the demand numbers and looking at the model that we were using because there was uncertainty raised around that. We've also set up more monitoring, particularly around resource consents and trying to ground through some of the supply rates that we're using in the parking plan. So I guess we're just here today to try and seek approval for the parking plan and happy to take any questions.
Okay, any questions? Because it's quite a reasonably grunty document. Paul first, then Jimmy, then Yanni.
Just want to talk through it again. It's the radical reduction of the on-street parking, and it's about 39%, if my figures are correct, a reduction on-street parking in the central city. In pre-earthquake, we calculated the amount of traffic that was generated by parking on certain streets, and take into account what was, say, let's take Litchfield Street for an example sake, and the reduction of the on-street parking on those streets. Essentially, we could increase the levels of parking on various streets because of the reduction of the on-street parking. So but I don't hear that coming through some of the rhetoric. So the question is that will you take into account that massive reduction of on-street parking that can be replaced back into some of these on-street parking, off-street parking locations that you're talking about?
Yeah. The supply forecast that we've got and the demand forecast that take account of that. So we know we've estimated how much parking will be lost, particularly through transport projects and public realm projects, and we're now monitoring that as well. And we're adjusting how much off-street parking supply we think we need based on that. So it is included and accounted for.
On top of that, I'd like to flag a concern just with regard to a one rule applies. With Central or Christchurch has been decentralised in many respects, so that we have various business districts in Christchurch now, not just Central City. And what we've got is a duopoly of how we treat these areas. So we're allowing some of these large suburban centres to put massive car parks on that actually generate a huge amount of traffic and constrict streets to the ridiculous. And whilst we want to have a beautiful, nice, easy, friendly walking city, it's just a point just that I'm raising as a point. Okay. Are you thinking about actually applying that same rule that you're applying here in Central City into the suburban activity centres?
So in terms of... This doesn't, like the parking plan itself is a non-statutory document, and the whole purpose of it is for it to be live, and that's what we're seeking, approval from council from. So we recognise that we need to update it when new information comes on board. In terms of the rules, this doesn't change any of those. There's a very permissive regime in place for the central city at the moment, which the minister made through an accessible city. You're basically allowed to provide up to 50% of your gross leasable floor area in parking. Now, many developers are choosing not to do that. That's their prerogative. But in terms of the malls themselves, yep, different rules do apply there. But we're looking to kind of change those through the district plan as well. So this is really a guidance document, and it's a policy document. And what it says is it's both for council and developers, and it really says these are the areas where we think you're going to have a shortfall in car parking. These are what we think the demand rates are going to be, and we'll use it ourselves in terms of saying, well, this is where council might want to invest its money, but it's also got to be used by the private sector as well to say, well, if we see an opportunity in the market, we're going to use this information and we're going to go in and do something about it. So it's not supposed to be set in stone. It's just supposed to be there as a guidance and policy document for all those people. So I hope that clarifies some of it.
Done his. I've got Jimmy, Yanni, Jamie. Jimmy.
Because based on your presentation, you particularly mentioned this is parking plan is a live document. But if we reviewed on page 273, the staff recommendation 6.4, the quarterly monitoring. Can you please confirm with us this quarterly monitoring is so you mean the 4 times a year will be amendment this plan, am I right?
Well, not necessarily. I guess what we're doing is Kevin Warwood and his team are going out there on a quarterly basis and monitoring the amount of on-street and off-street parking, and basically working out whether there's sufficient supply to meet the demand. And we also get a whole lot of other information that filters into that as well.
Yes.
But that might show that there's no need to change the figures, or it might show there's a radical need to change them. It's just moving that quick that we feel we need to monitor on a quarterly basis, but that doesn't mean the document needs to change on a quarterly basis. It will depend on what's happening on the ground.
Okay, so if that's true, no any financial impact?
No, there's no. Well, the financial impact is in terms of us doing the work, I guess, so that there is ongoing costs, but I can't speak to how big those are. I wouldn't imagine they're huge.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yanni.
Thanks. 2 words that don't seem to appear anywhere in the principles, which I think are really important, are accessibility and affordability. So have you done any work around those areas in terms of, for example, people coming in to use the library or to go swimming, paying, more in car parking charges than the cost of swimming? Is there any consideration in terms of accessibility from an affordable point of view for car parking in the central city?
I think while we might not use those words per se, accessibility is certainly something which underpins those principles. And if you turn to page 521 of your report, which has the parking principles outlined in a little bit more detail, look at the first one, parking support economic vitality. That's top of the list. You're not going to support economic vitality if you're charging at such a high rate that no one's going to use it. So it's almost inherent within that assumption. But the parking operations plan that Kevin and his team are doing, which he'll bring back for you in due course, that's all about pricing to ensure that we get a good, well, you explain it better than I would.
Well, it's about utilisation more than anything, and that's where, to a certain degree, it's blind to the type of activity that is. So you've got a fixed resource, you want to make sure that it's utilised as best as you possibly can. And that the utilisation and the mechanisms around determining that and pricing, if you like, will be all picked up in the parking operations plan in more detail. But sure, there would be. I would think that there would be some allowances certainly for accessibility to public facilities.
So just in terms of, you know, one of the things we heard about Litchfield was that it was really good for it was probably the best car park for people with disabilities. But I don't really get a sense of that those sorts of basic barrier-free design things will occur through parking provision, particularly on the off-street.
They're definitely in there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I would have thought it was a natural requirement of the accessible city,
It's
just
in the
by
park-
definition.
It's in the parking principles. We've got a picture underneath, and we've actually got disabled and short-stay parking illustrated right on that basement level. So it's the first thing that you see when you come in.
Great.
So that's
Thank
kind
you.
of what we're trying to do to guide.
Thank
And
you. Is that the lot, Yanni?
Just the final question is, the thing that's missing for me is that where you've got council provision of car parking, so and
What page is that, sorry?
well, if you look at the map, so 517, you've got opportunities. What we don't have in here is where council's spending a lot of money on car parking. So at our community board yesterday, one of the things that came to mind was the fact that we're spending money as an organisation and providing car parking for our staff at a huge cost, and then providing off-street parking for the community at a lower rate than what we're paying. So if we wanted to save money, using some of our own facilities to actually, you know, have our own organisation parking requirements met, rather than paying private people to deliver that service at 3 or 4 times the cost, would seem a sensible way to go. So is there a work stream in here that looks at where we're currently got leases on car parks and where we own car parks and making sure that we've got a financial efficiency?
That area probably sits between property and my team, parking ops. So, as you mentioned at the board meeting yesterday, it was highlighted at the time. I have already spoken to a couple of people about that. The possibility of picking up one side and then having a look at the facility side of things. At the moment, they are split. Right. But I do take your point that we do provide some public parking in places where the public will require it for access to facilities like Hagley Park. But not very far from there, we're paying on a property lease basis, if you like, which is different to a parking lease basis for car parks, for staff and for various other council activities.
Yeah, it's just... And just the final one was the residential. Yeah, this is the final. Sorry, I meant to raise it. But just when I look at your map, and I presume 517 is really the kind of key kind of map, but I know since this has been done, we've had the changes to central city living. So is there a work stream in here around just looking at that whole intensification of the urban residential areas and what possible solutions there are in terms of parking provision with the, you know, no longer requiring minimum requirements as part of the development? Because I would have thought in that northeast quadrant, there's significant demands on parking, but there's no kind of thing.
So, in terms of the residential provisions, obviously those have been set by the Minister as part of the residential chapter, and I think we'll have to see how it shakes down in terms of what people actually provide on site, because while there might not be a minimum parking requirement through the statutory provisions, that doesn't stop anyone actually providing for car parking themselves. And one of the things that we're constantly having to monitor is with this reasonably laissez-faire regime to parking is what people are actually providing, because previously we had a degree of certainty with the minimums that we had, and we knew that people would either have to provide them or seek a resource consent. Now, We're playing a bit of a guessing game to see what people will do. So, yep, it might become a bit of an issue for us if no one's providing any on-site parking, but then I'd really question whether they're going to be able to build and sell residential properties and not provide any parking on-site. So I think, you've got the market, in a sense, will determine what degree of parking is required for properties to shift.
Okay, Jamie.
I have full confidence in the ITE committee, so it's nothing along those lines, but it's just interested in the staff rationale around the delegation. What was the point of delegating that? Is that just to be nimble, really?
Just to be nimble, really. I mean, it's one of the key recommendations is that it is a live document because things are moving so quickly, and we want to keep this as up to date as possible. So really, to do that rather than report back through ITE and council, we simply sought that delegations remain to ITE, and we weren't really envisaging that be changed to the parking principle or core fundamentals of the document. It was really just to go, well, if the numbers start shifting and someone bangs in a big parking building somewhere, then all of a sudden that could have a bit of a change to this. So you go, well, okay, you'd modify your figures accordingly. So it's really just to take into account what's actually happening on the ground, what people are providing.
Can I do a Yanni final? Thank you. Thank you everyone for your indulgence. It's really around the word recommended then, just so I've got a handle on that. Is that recommended by staff or recommended by the committee? When you just say to approve any recommended changes, do you mean staff recommendations?
Yep.
So as long as they're not deviating from a staff recommendation, that can be done. Perhaps if the committee had a new recommendation that differed from staff, it would come back to council, is that right?
To be honest, I haven't thought that one through, but that might be a way forward.
Maybe Phil's help me.
Phil's going to solve it for you.
Well, I can sort of answer that. There was discussion informally earlier this morning, and clearly if there are major shifts, for example, including major numbers of car parking, then I would expect certainly there'd be clear agreement that the committee would maybe make a recommendation, but it would be a council decision. And I was also going to ask...
Can we just clarify that, because it came up very early this morning on both Riccarton Road and parking and various other big issues. Those big issues we agreed the ITE committee would refer back to the council. So yes.
Would it be easier if Phil's happy with it just to say then any staff recommended changes? It's just clarifies that a bit. Yep. Thanks.
Yep.
Because I was just going to check with Richard, I would expect that from what's in the report that in fact any changes are likely to be relatively small. We're not at all likely to be talking about large numbers of car parks in one hit. Well,
I guess if council were to make a decision on something, north of the square is an area which the ITE committee, if you look at 6.5 on page 273, the committee noted there was concern about lack of confirmed short stay parking north of the square. So something like that is, if someone came in with a big facility north of the square, that would be a bit of a game changer, and that would be the type of thing that we'd look to bring back.
Paul?
Just on that delegated stuff, Central City is a part of the Hagley-Ferramy ward, and there is no one on the ITE committee that actually is, so there is no representation. So I'd like to move, and I have discussed this with Phil, that a member of our, either Yanni himself, I would like to go on the committee.
Right, so let's not have another one of those debates just now. How about you do that when Leanne's back? Because I lack the tolerance. Yeah, that's fine for you. So you sort that with Phil and bring something back, okay? So what we've got before us in terms of in terms of the recommendations is just one minor amendment. Is there any debate on this? Yanni?
Picking up on the point that that committee might be authorised to make changes, but actually the board should be involved. There were, before the earthquake, 7,500 people that lived in the central city who vote for community board members to represent them. A number of parking issues are raised with the local community board, as people in Merivale or Riccarton or Whenelton Waimari will be aware. So, I don't think it's right that the community board doesn't have the powers of recommendations as per any other community board in the city. So, in terms of those delegations, is it possible to add some step that at least that community board can be notified and have an opportunity to comment?
Mr Phil.
Well, look, I just think in terms of process, it would be sensible, in my view, to actually incorporate suggestions like that and then decisions when it comes to looking at the delegations for all community boards. And certainly with issues like this is a big one, and so mainly from the point of view of making sure that all of this is workable.
However, if it comes up before then, you will actually deal with that. Yep. Okay. Right. Right. Any other debate? If not, can I put this with the slight amendment there? Put that. Those in favour, please say aye. Those opposed, carried. And then Part B items moved by Phil, seconded by Pauline. Can I put all of those? And Part C. And that again comes back to that issue of delegation.